My name is Carlin Reed. I'm the chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee. Our meeting is not yet officially called to order because we do not yet have a quorum. We're waiting for one more member to show up. But in the meantime, I'd like to raise a couple of questions that we've had from the people who've assembled today at this PEG Access meeting. And we have a couple things also on our agenda that we can talk about. The first of which is I want to ask you about the meeting schedule that we have set up. We have our next meeting is set for March 11. We have April 8 and May 6. Now for the March 11 meeting, what I'd like to do is to take in a couple of issues that Vince has kindly raised and reminded me about, dealing with looking at our committee's charge. What should this committee be doing starting next year, essentially? We already have our goals for this year posted up on the webpage, and thank you for getting those goals posted, by the way. So we know what's going to happen until the end of May, essentially. But what's going to happen next year? What should our committee do? What can we approach on? So we'll be looking at the charge. We're also going to be looking at recruiting for membership for this committee. Like almost every other committee in town, there's a vacancy in ours. There will probably be, I'm going to guess, 1, 2 at least, maybe more, who knows, but at least one vacancy next year. And anybody here who is interested in joining, who is not a member of this committee, please consider submitting your green card to the town, because I'd like to have you on this committee if possible. We may also, if we have time, get a preliminary view of the budget. Now, I've been told by Kate Hodges that the town preview meeting, which is February 27, I believe, this Saturday, will have a showing of the budget for the PEG Access funding account. So that will have been presented at our March 11 meeting. We can spend a little time going over some of the highlights of it, and if necessary, which it probably will be, carry the budget discussion over towards April 8. Okay, for those two meetings, March and April, that's what I kind of envision us to be talking about at that time. Now, Vince, you've given me some those ideas for March meeting. What do you think? How does that sound to you as far as the scheduling issue?
Yeah, I think that's fine from a scheduling standpoint.
Okay, all right, Ruth, how are you feeling about that as a scheduling approach?
It sounds to me that you are building the charge into two discussions, two meetings.
Absolutely.
Which I think is important, because once we as a committee resolve our thoughts on this, it then has to be forwarded to the selectmen, because the selectmen are the body who charge us. So we want to get it, we want to have thought it through, resolve it for our own satisfaction, and then send it to the board of, no, not the board of selectmen, to the select board, so that they can act in a timely way.
Okay, sounds good. So that's the general plan for the March 11 and April 8 meetings. Will cover those two big topics: our charge, recruitment, and as well as the preliminary look at the budget for the PEG Access Fund. Dawn and Pat, I see that you have joined us. Court, I see that you've joined us too. That's great. Now we finally have a quorum, so now we will be able to start a meeting. What we've been doing up until now is talking about a couple of issues dealing with scheduling and what we're going to be seeing in our March 11 meeting, which will cover the charge and the membership, as well as take a preliminary look at the budget. So that's the looking forward for March 11 and April 8. Hello, Matt. Thank you for joining us. I know I'm repeating myself for everybody, but that's okay. On the March 11 meeting, we're looking at charge and membership, and on the April 8 meeting, we're going to be looking at charge, membership, budget, get a preliminary discussion for those two meetings. Okay, now that we have a quorum for the meeting, I'm going to call this meeting to order officially.
At which o'clock?
I have 9:40 a.m.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Hi, this is Carlin Reed. I'm chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee. Welcome to our February meeting. We have a number of things on our agenda. And I wanted to note that this meeting is being recorded for later viewing and playback. One of the first items we have everybody here on the meeting. We have a couple of special guests, Don Gorello and Pat Nelson, who are here to help us through our discussion on the Minuteman Media Network, on a possible mini studio at the middle school. We also have Judy Zonbrucker, who is here to help us with a complaint that she has regarding Comcast. We'll be getting an update from Minuteman Media Network and whatever. And we also need to vote on the minutes. So let's take the easy one first. Let's go to the minutes of January 14 from the last minutes. I have distributed that to you before this meeting. And I'm going to ask to see if there are any edits to the minutes. Okay. Does anyone have any edits to the minutes? Get this. Okay.
I would move approval.
Okay, let's take that motion from Court. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second from Vince. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote for approval of the minutes. Vince, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, Court, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ruth, what about you?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay. That means the minutes have been approved as presented. We'll get those sent off to the clerk's office as well. Thank you. All right, next thing I'm going to take care of here. Talked about the minutes of the meetings, the next meetings. Okay, I think I'm going to do, okay. Phil, let's have you give an update on the studio and what's been going on. Take it away, Phil.
Sure, thank you. So it's been,
Carlin, can I just
Hold it,
propose
hold
that
it, wait. Matt, go ahead.
just a point of order. Could we just take this agenda item out of order because we have guest speakers and they could move on to other meetings?
Absolutely. Okay. You don't mind that, Phil. That's okay with you?
Not at all.
Okay, sounds good. I was going to use that as laying the foundation for what happens next, but if you want to move it out of order, that's fine. Let's do the middle school building design committee. How about that? Okay. Now, with that in mind,
So just clarification,
ahead.
not design per se, but rather the chairs of the entire school building committee presenting from the top, not subcommittees per se.
very good. I appreciate that. Okay, in your packets that I've distributed to everybody here, you have received several copies of documents for this particular agenda item. There is get this, presentation that the middle school building committee gave to the select board this past Monday. Gives you kind of an outline of where the school committee is right now. Don, if you want to give a few highlights of it, that's fine, but you don't have to go through all the presentation. In fact, I prefer if you don't. Personally, I've heard it 5 times.
If I don't.
But, well, it's one of those things. It's available on several locations on the town's website as well as on the school's website for this presentation. And you had a public forum recently.
Sure, and I could give just high level, and if folks have had time to digest it and have questions, or I would offer that any future, because there's lots of opportunity to participate in discussion, that I welcome your attendance at other meetings. For example, we're at
Right,
finance.
Great. Let me frame the discussion first, because there are a couple of documents that you can be looking at. It'll be the presentation that Don and Pat have given. It'll be the proposal that I've also sent out. And there's a chart called the franchise related cost chart from the Comcast 1240 rate form that I've also sent out. Okay, so that's where we go. All right, now with those documents and with that framework, Don, Pat, a quick summary of where the middle school is right now.
Yeah, so we're happy to give you an update. I think we were hoping to more listen than present. So I certainly welcome any sort of questions, comments, concerns. But the middle school building committee has been working feverishly for about 1.5 years with a pause for approximately 6 months due to COVID. So we're starting back up, and we are working at a brisk pace to finish up feasibility study. And what that means is that's a piece of what the town meeting almost 2 years ago now voted to approve funding for. So there's a feasibility study that basically where you figure out the size of the building, what it, how it meets the educational plan, and then the schematic design, which you put a floor plan, massing, material selection, and come to a project cost that you put forward for a formal vote to do the project or not do the project. So we're partway through that initial piece, which would take us through the end of schematic design. And where we are with things as an update is that we had a ideal building that we looked at last spring before the pause that was a little larger than what we had hoped for. We asked our designer and our OPM to take a step back and reevaluate, start from ground up, work with the educational plan that Lori Hunter and her team have put together, and we can put a link up to that in the chat. So that was officially approved by the school committee on January 26th. And so the framework around the building now is that we're working through how the size and number of spaces can that educational plan. So that's literally in the works as we speak. That's been initially presented to the design subcommittee, which Court is chair of, and is working very hard to move that forward for a formal recommendation to the greater building committee. We also have sustainability subcommittees and other groups that are working in parallel, communication subcommittees. Maybe you attended or weren't able. Our community forum that we had, gosh, almost 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago. We have another one coming up on the 24th at 7 p.m. So if you haven't seen the flyer on that, we're happy to share it and encourage you to join and listen in. There will be a presentation by our professionals, the architect and OPM. And they've been doing a lot of these presentations. This is really Pat and I kind of coming at Carlin's invitation, and I didn't even know you guys existed. So I'm so thankful to understand more. I'm new to Concord. I've only lived here a couple of years, so I'm still very much learning the lay of the land here. But that's where we are with the building. So we're basically trying to find the right size to meet the educational plan. And then from that, our professionals will come back to us with plan options, literally floor plans, to take a look at how this might lay out. And with that, some tough decisions are having to be made as far as shared spaces, dual purpose spaces. How can we fit in the right size gym and auditorium for both educational needs as well as community needs? We're hearing a lot of information from a lot of sources about desires for this building. So we're trying to digest it all and understand what can fit within our budget and how we can design the best middle school for the students of Concord, as well as the community of Concord. So I don't know if that's enough of a high level kind of where we are. I don't want to get into the weeds because everyone has documents in front of them, but
oh, that's good.
Also make that building fit within the 80 to 100 million dollar range that was presented at town meeting. So
that's good. Appreciate that. Pat, yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just add that there are other constraints on the project that we're also starting to look at, which are the amount of ground we can actually cover at that site. So as we're wrestling with the cost of maybe having an auditorium that meets the community needs, or gym space that meets the community needs, or other requests for community needs, we're also going to have to look at the size of the building and how it fits on the land. So that's just another factor that we'll be looking at closer to schematic design when we know really what the building's going to look like. And we have been talking to a lot of people. So we're interested to hear what you all are thinking about. I read your proposal. It's nicely laid out. I'd like to hear more about what you're hoping for.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you both coming and entertaining this concept, because this is something that I have been asking or talking about it with the school committee, with the middle school building committee for about a year now. And it's the idea that actually came from the deputy town manager's office, who suggested that we have a second site for a studio, because Concord is actually kind of big, and there are different ways of covering the events that occur in town. Now, the proposal that I'd heard a year ago was to have a mobile TV studio van. That would cost roughly about $225,000 to outfit. And it would be one that could be rolled around town, used not just to to make videos, but to also broadcast live from the game, for example, that type of a thing. And sometimes some towns do have that. So when I personally started investigating this concept, the idea, it occurred to me that there are many towns that have two studios, one at the high school and one at the middle school. And Cord, I believe you had once told me, and I think you've said it several times, that middle school kids are interested in taking videos. Well, I guess that seems kind of obvious, doesn't it?
Well, just nationally, what we find is a fondness for radio for high school kids and a fondness for TV production on middle school kids. It's a generality, but there seems to be something to it.
Okay, so I took those pieces together and started running around trying to find places that had a TV studio of some sort in the middle school, and I found one in Chelmsford. Chelmsford was, the studio manager there was gracious to give me a tour, explained how their operation worked. The middle school is actually their main studio, and the high school is their satellite. When I heard that we were going to be designing a middle school building for Concord, I thought, well, this is a possible opportunity to have another location where the students will have an opportunity to learn about the world of video and its concerns and some benefits. Also to have a site that is south of Route 2. So it might provide more access to community members who wanted to be able to use some of the facilities at off school hour times to do their work if they can't get to the high school. But more importantly, to have it integrated within the student's educational plan. And then I saw that the middle school has an after school club, a media club that up until COVID was meeting. I don't know if it still is, but that's what prompted me to say, well, this is something that I think that our committee could consider, could think about. Now, the proposal that I've sent to you all talks about how it could be integrated. And it goes into, it's a very high level description of what could be done. I don't really know what could be done inside the middle school, but I have a feeling that you have people here on this call who have some expertise in running a studio and could help in providing whatever educational needs the middle school students would have for a place in the media center or on the in the auditorium or in a technology room or someplace. But the key first is, besides talking about it here at this committee, is to see if what kind of if there are some wiring needs, some structural needs, some design needs that need to be built into the plan now to allow this to happen. Now, I'll take one step more to this, and then I'm going to stop talking about it and get some reaction from you folks, is we do have available funding for this purpose that does not rely on tax dollars. So Don, in other words, this would not break your $100 million budget. Okay, that's part of the key there, and that would come from PEG access funds. We have done this sort of thing before, and what I'm going to show you now is a copy of the franchise-related cost sheet that shows how we used funds from PEG access in 2014, 2015, 2016 to help build the Concord High School TV studio. So let me do I'm going to do a quick sharing of this. Hold on. Let's see if I can get this done right. Let's see. Okay. And we're looking at that right now. Okay, there's the franchise related costs. Pull that one down. Okay, that's what I want. Let's see. Okay. Nope, gotta try it again. I won't get this yet. Ah, there it is. Okay.
Ta-da!
Yes, that's kind of small, isn't it? It is really small. I think I can zoom into a couple things like that.
Ooh, yay.
Much better, much bigger. Needs to be even bigger. Okay, so every year Comcast files a Form 1240 that sets the rates for our town and for all of its communities. This particular page of that form is the one that shows the rates, and I'm zooming into 125%, that were implemented as of January 1, 2020, so the beginning of last year. Now they filed another one for this year. The rates are going to go up a little bit, no big surprise. But what this does is it shows over on the left-hand side, the current capital obligations that were part of the franchise related agreement. 2014, 15, so there's 17, 14, 15. These are costs that were negotiated as part of the contract between Comcast and the town of Concord. And you can see that the total amount for these years was about $238,000 for capital improvements. Now, Court, you may have some more information about what these were all about. So please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But based on this information, we negotiated essentially about $240,000 of capital improvements for various programs. And I think if you look at our franchise agreement itself, it'll say it's for the high school. The way that dollar amount is then recovered, Comcast collects it from the cable subscriber fees, not taxpayers, but cable subscriber fees. And then essentially, is the word amortize appropriate? Essentially spreads out the cost of that among the number of true up subscribers. That's the number of cable TV subscribers as of a certain date in that year. In this case, it was 5,258 cable subscribers. So that a monthly per subscriber fee of 72 cents, called the franchise related cost, shows up on your cable TV bill. That's what it's for. It's to recover the costs of the capital improvement obligations that were negotiated as part of the franchise agreement. So basically what that means is that $238,000 is spread out over a 10-year period, because that's the term of the contract, and the cable subscribers pay 72 cents a month. All right, now, just so as a side note, that 72 cents a month for 2020 is going to go up to 75 cents a month for 2021, based on the current rate schedule. Okay, I'm about ready to stop sharing this particular chart. Are there any questions about this chart before I leave it? No? Okay,
Carlin,
Don, go ahead.
I do have a question. Was that entire amount used on the high school?
That I don't know for sure, but I can look at the franchise agreement. A lot of it was 2014. A lot of it was. Court, do you have any other information about that at this time?
It was not all used. There were two parts of the high school that had select board support for additional infusion of monies, the community education office and the cable TV office. The other non-MSBA part of the high school, the alternate gym, came out through direct appropriation through town meeting.
Okay, and I have a follow-up if that's relevant. It may not be on this chart, but do you know the size of the space in the high school?
Well, I think we have station managers here, and perhaps he can help if the court doesn't know.
Yeah, we can get it quickly. It's as tight as you can go.
Yeah,
we'll say that. You know,
okay.
It's one studio, one small engineering room, two small offices, and then a hallway that has become the editing bay and the teaching station, and a bathroom.
So it's a suite.
So that it's independent of this. It can operate independently of the school.
Okay, it's a suite of spaces. I'm working on Lowell High School, and they actually have a TV studio suite. And
yeah, Lowell has been a powerhouse in this for a long time.
Yeah, that's my project. Yeah. So I'm a little bit familiar with how these work. That's obviously a high school and would be, you know, but okay. So some information I would love to see is the square footage and size of the studio suite, not just the studio, but if there, I assume there's floor plans since that's a relatively new building. And then also how much of that approximately 240 over the course of however many years, however much of it was allocated might be helpful just to understand scope and size of project versus, and was that all of that used for that space, or was there, like, how was it funded? Was 100% of the, however much of the 240 just for that space? So that was all that they spent on it, or was there money outside of that that was used? Might also be helpful if anyone knows.
We can get that.
I think we can. Yeah, I'll work to get that to you, Don. Now, my eyeballing of the studio is about 40 by 40. So about 1,600 square feet for the main studio. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to have all that square footage for a smaller version inside the high school.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, Court, I thought I heard you mention that there was an office for community ed in there. So is that one of the two small offices?
No, that's completely independent. I only
Complete-
referenced that because in the absence of MSBA support, the town government had to recognize that they were going to pony up 100% of the cost for those specific areas, not cost less reimbursement.
Okay. So I guess what I think, and I think what you're getting at, Dawn, is if we were to imagine putting this into the middle school, what's the minimum amount of space you're talking about? You know, what you know, instead of replicating what's at the high school, which may be totally appropriate, but you know, what's the minimum amount of space you're talking about? So we have an idea of how to plug that in if we can.
Can I complicate things for you, Pat?
Yeah, of course.
The ed plan calls for the desirability of mini stages in the language classrooms for purposes of videotaping. So just know that there could be some overlap between a talk about a studio and a talk about a video production capacity in classrooms. We've got to see the whole picture carefully here.
So it's not necessarily just, can we find more space in our current estimate right now, but maybe look at what the capacity is to implement some TV production within what we've already got.
Yeah, or different ways of doing this. There's traditional studio, and what I'm getting at is there are other options. And I'm not going to recommend one, and because I'm on the building committee, I'm not going to render any opinion through this committee.
Right.
I serve on also.
And you're on the school committee, because this is also part of the educational plan.
Right.
Well, right?
Although it's a town project, the school committee has a keen interest, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question. Matt, did you have a question that you
Yeah,
want to talk about?
I actually had a few, but one is, it seems to me that from the school's use of such a space, it should derive from the educational plan. And so we really should look to the educational plan as driving any school use. And then when you consider the studio, the other potential is community use. And what is on my mind is potential conflicts in terms of schedule. I think that hasn't there been some of that at the high school, that when the high school's in session, you know, the public access is limited, and you would have that situation repeated if you put, you know, a community studio at another school site. And it seemed to me that wouldn't it make more sense to put it at a different type of facility that, you know, wouldn't have those kinds of time constraints. And then the final question is really about cost. You know, I just eyeballing this, let's just say it's 1,000 square feet, but you know, the par cost for the project is $555 a square foot. So we're talking more than $500,000. So I don't know that the money that's available for PEG would cover, you know, the incremental costs required for the studio. So those are all the points, and some of them have questions embedded in them.
Okay, I'm going to take another question. David Allen, you've got your hand up. Could you give your name and address, please?
Certainly. David Allen, 316 Heath Bridge Road. Clearly, central question here is whether or not there's space, whether or not the functionality is appropriate. But let's also go to the money aspect. I think that's, shall we say, secondary to these primary questions, but nonetheless central. As Carlin has just very usefully laid out for us, this actually comes out of the Concord subscribers. And we saw the subscriber numbers there in the 5,000 range, maybe 5,500, I forget precisely. But with order of 6,000 households, that means that order of 90% of Concord households, at least back in, I think, 2015, would actually be paying for this. I don't think we want to be in the position of saying that we're not going to raise your taxes because we're going to take this money out of PEG. We're really taking it out of the citizens. I'll moderate that just a taste by noticing that there is somewhat less cable TV subscribership, with some people cutting the cord. But bottom line, to a first approximation, this money is coming out of the Concord citizen. And I don't think we want to be, as I say, in the position of suggesting that somehow or another it's not. Once again, I don't think that's a primary consideration. I think we want to be honest about it. But instead of now that I've said this, focusing on that, I want to go back to, among other things, considerations that everybody else has raised here, Matt and Court and Carlin, and this question of whether or not it's appropriate in this facility to have this functionality.
Thank you. There are other comments or observations. Frank first, then Ruth. Frank?
Well,
Frank,
mine is-
could you give your, hold on,
Oh, yeah,
name and address?
Francis Breen, Phillip Farm Road, Concord, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, my comment is that if I had, money to spend on a studio, the last place I do it is in another school for the same reasons that were mentioned before. That probably so difficult to use the one that we currently have in a school that, and with also the fact is that I'm sure with the economy being what it is, that there's probably plenty of rental space in town that you could set a little studio up so people could just wander in whenever they felt like and do work. So that's my opinion on that. That schools are very expensive and there's cheaper places and where the public can actually go there much more often. So. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Ruth, what's your view?
I think I am piggybacking on Matt and Frank in my view that if we see the issues at CC, which is a vital partner, we would only replicate if we went to the middle school, but it fits the kids' needs at the middle school. How can we add to their services, protect our community's expenditures? And Frank is raising an important issue. There are some spaces that could be used, probably not with as long an agreement as we would have with the school. But is there anything really available? Have we looked at anything else?
All right, Judy's, would you give your name and address, please? Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, Judy Zombrecker, 402 Border Road. I have a question, and that is, would putting a studio as is being discussed at the middle school enable the ability for events held in the auditorium to be live streamed? It is my understanding right now that we don't have those capabilities elsewhere. And I know from my work at the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle doing candidate forums when we could get together in person, that was a problem. We would run forums and there were many people who couldn't attend and it was difficult for them necessarily to see the forum. And in other towns like in Chelmsford and Lowell, when I ran forums there, we were able to live stream them and it significantly increased the community being able to watch the forums and consequently be educated. So I don't know if having a studio in the middle school would facilitate that capability. If it would, it might be worth considering even for taxpayers because it would increase community education on important topics.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Judy. Let's go to Court. Court, what do you think?
Well, again, I'm going to make it more complex. We can talk about a studio and or talk about the capacity of this new building to have fiber running to the head end at the high school, which I think really addresses what Judy's talking about. Because anybody can drop a camera into the auditorium and go out live if indeed through cable, in addition to the Facebook Live and the YouTube Live that people are doing now with a phone in their hand. We could put out high quality stuff from, let us say, the auditorium. So I think it's two questions and they're different, but we've got to bear them both in mind.
Good point. All right, I'm going to go to Phil first and then Don. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on what Court and Judy were saying, the technology is there. It's, really now it's just connecting into an internet jack. So, like the high school has the couple jacks for the cable, but, in order to go to like a middle school now, we do not have the equipment, but it is available. So there are other alternatives for doing stuff like Judy has pointed out. So, now you're no longer limited. It was always basically a physical structure thing. When a cable company would set up, you would have so many cable drops throughout the community, however many buildings, and that would be it. But now, again, with the internet, it just opens it up on a whole different level. Again, as I say, the technology is out there. It's just, purchasing some other types of equipment. So again, in fact, that was actually one of the points I was going to bring up. We've been doing a little bit of research into that area. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Phil. Don, let's go to you then, Vince. Don?
Court and Phil maybe just answer. I was going to say that seems to be more of a technology solution than, a need to have it in the building in order to live broadcast. But I will say that running fiber can be very expensive and there are limits to the length in which you can run it. So we just need to be cognizant of that if that's the plan. I'm all too aware of how expensive it can be to make connections, and then also the constraints on how many turns and how far you can go. So that's a whole nother topic, but just be aware if that's what we're ultimately, thinking. Those are sometimes issues that can come up.
Thank you, Don. Okay, we're taking Vince and then David. Vince, go ahead.
My connection had dropped out there for a couple of minutes, so this may have come up again, but question is on public access. And, I think it's been mentioned by others. There have been issues with the current studio because there isn't really good public access when school is in session. So is there some way to, design the building so that there would be public access throughout the day, or at least, for an extended type of a studio activity?
Don, if you and Pat haven't done so, on Minuteman Media Network's website, there's a take a virtual tour of the building, of the facilities. It's quite good. I suggest you take a look at it so you can get a visual of what that looks like.
I have not, and I actually don't know where it is in the high school. I've only been in the high school for town meeting and for basketball games, to be honest with you. So I need to get in there and check things out. But I can say that access is really a policy thing. So like at Lowell, where their location is deep in the building, but they have public, visitors that check in and have their license scan, query checks, et cetera, and then they're able to navigate to the studio, which is open in theory to the public and people they're interviewing and et cetera. So seems to me that's a policy thing, but again, I don't know anything about the high school.
Well, quick note, there is a contract, an agreement between the town and the regional school district that addresses a lot of phases of access to the studio on school property, terms and conditions, and that's been executed. David, you had a quick comment? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, picking up on the question of cost of fiber access. Not a direct comparison. Nonetheless, I think it gives a very rough flavor. The town needed the mass vaccination site at the high school because I do the light plant board all the time. I can report that Dave Wood there says it cost $30,000. Which they hustled real fast to make happen. electrification different from fiber, and yet the costs are not so different because the real issues are the labor and getting cables in. As a kind of jumping off point, real question is, where's the fiber out there? I bet it's pretty close. I would suspect that numbers aren't that gigantic to do the necessary fiber. I'm sure they're going to be fibered anyway. I don't think that what we're talking about here is going to be the cause for getting the fiber in there.
Good, thank you. I'm going to wind up this decision in about 3 more minutes so we can move to the other agenda items and get to Judy's Comcast complaint. But Don, do consider the fiber network that's available. Pat, I do consider this as a possibility. Think about it. And if you'd like to come back to the committee, that's fine. If you need some more input, just let us know. Don or Pat, do you have any last minute thoughts about this or questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Just if for a point of clarification, the access to the high school studio and the issues with access, is that because of again, policy about who can come in during the day, or is it conflicts between the students using the studio? In Court, I have a feeling you might have an answer for that.
Go ahead, Court.
The official answer is parking, but we do have other considerations. Security being one of them, the porous nature of the building, but parking is the big one.
So it's not because the students need to be in there during the day, the high school students.
They have scheduling privileges. They don't have drop-in privileges.
Okay.
Okay, anything else last minute for this, Don? Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and whoever else has wanted to tune into this particular episode, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Carlin.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah. Can I
Thanks for
assume you
having
don't
us.
need us for the balance, Carlin?
You're welcome to stay if you wish, or you're welcome to do whatever you wish. Oh, hold on, Court
Well,
might have a different opinion. Okay,
No,
Court,
no,
go
no,
ahead.
just stating the obvious before Dawn and Pat leaves, and that is that MMN that Phil represents is a critical asset to the building project in its communication responsibilities. So we just want to note that.
I agree. And I often try to thank them when I see them when we were in person for, broadcasting and sharing what we're doing with the residents of Concord. So
One more thing, Ruth, for your notes, do you need Dawn's or Pat's address for the minutes?
I would also need Dawn's last name.
yeah, sorry.
That I
I
can
don't
deal.
know why it only has G. So it's Guariello.
Could you spell
That
it
should
for
be
her, please?
straightforward, right? It's Guarriello.
And an address?
Yes, 57 Bristers Hill Road.
Oh, so you look at the high school all the time.
Oh, my kids make me drive through and see what's going on. And nowadays it's not much, maybe a little sledding. But every time we drive that way home, drive through the high school, see what's going on. We used to stop and watch football games, etc. Yeah, as a community member, I so appreciate the access that I have. I can cut through my neighbor's yard and use the sledding hill up to the turf. So I'm all about schools being a community asset, and I use the high school field all the time. Skate park, fields, sledding, you name it. So
Thank you, Don.
I'm right
Pat?
there. All right, sorry. Thank you guys. Thanks for having us.
Wait, Pat, you've got to give your address as
Yeah.
part of the protocol. Go ahead.
52 Cottage Lane.
Thank you, ma'am.
And a
You're
general note
welcome.
that Don and Pat are the co-chairs of the middle school building committee. Thank you, ladies, very much.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
that.
us.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Okay, that was fun. Let's go on to the next discussion item. And this is, I'm going to jump to Judy Zonbrecker. She's presented a complaint about Comcast service. And this is the kind of thing that cable TV committee, cable advisory committees in other towns routinely do, is they hear and try to address or help complaints from their citizens about the cable provider. So Judy, I'm going to turn over to you. Please give your name and address for our clerk. Thank you.
Yes, Judy Zonbrecker, 402 Border Road. And thank you for inviting me to the meeting today and taking a look at my letter. My letter was initially, as you can see, to the select board, and a number of members of the select board suggested that I pass it on to the PEG Access Committee. And But my question to the select board was whether Fox News, our Comcast basic cable packages include Fox News, Fox Business, Newsmax, so that if you sign up for the Comcast basic cable, you are paying for those cables, which means that the money that I spend on my basic cable package goes to those news entities. So for instance, I know for Fox, about $20 a year of my money goes to Fox. And over the past several months, Fox News and Newsmax have propagated information around the election that court after court, I think there were over 60 cases around the election, said there was no evidence presented that the election was not fairly run, that did not support the assertion by then President Trump that the election had been stolen from him. And so the court of law, looking at the evidence or lack thereof, said there was nothing to those cases. However, Newsmax, Fox News, and Fox Business continued to propagate very loudly the lie that the election had been stolen. And then we get to January 6th, and I wrote this letter about a week after that, and now we're living through it again, and we're seeing the consequences of that lie being constantly spread and being accepted by people. And it led to great harm to people in the Capitol. It is leading to great harm within the country. And for me personally, it is an inconvenience to me and a concern to me, and is interfering with my life. Not suggesting that Fox News should be taken off the air. However, I question through the town whether I should be having to pay for a business entity that spreads lies that are so detrimental to our country. And I suspect there are many other people in Concord who might have a similar issue. So my question to the select board and to the town is, does Comcast violate the agreement by carrying these channels because they're carrying information that is causing harm to the individuals and citizens of Concord? Now, one could say, well, just cut the cable. I don't want to cut the cable. I have other services that come with that cable package that my household depends upon. For instance, I have terrible cell phone reception at my house. Most times I can't get a cell phone call through here. So consequently, I need to have a landline. We also need to have a fax for a number of reasons. For another reason, to have a landline. And when one bundles all that together, it is most economically efficient for me to buy a basic cable package. But I do object to the fact that I'm having to pay for news for a business entity, in fact, a couple of business entities that are spreading what has been proven to be false information that has led to problems. So that's my question. Is Comcast violating our agreement in terms of including that in the basic cable package? And what could be done to research that and approach Comcast about it? And then as I know, the cable license will be renewed in 2024 to negotiate with Comcast to remove those news networks from the basic cable package so that we're not supporting networks that basically are promoting harmful propaganda throughout the country.
Thanks, Judy. One quick observation. I see that you've sent a letter to our Comcast representative back in January. Did you
Yes.
get a response from him? And if so, what was it?
The response I got was, thank you for your complaint, and I haven't heard back from them.
Okay. All right. Any particular thoughts first from the committee on this particular issue?
Thanks for bringing it forward.
very much. Okay.
Carla?
Now, Vince, go ahead.
Well, it is, more or less the hottest topic almost in the news these days, in all venues, considering what's happening in Congress as we speak. But there is a freedom of press area there that has been specifically addressed by Section 230, which applies to the internet and has, come under discussion through the FCC. And it basically is the net neutrality issue. And net neutrality refers to two things. One is that it's the idea of giving all people who broadcast equal access. So, so that Netflix basically has the same access that Comcast's own services have. And to date, that does provide protection, so that Comcast can't slow Netflix down during prime time to accommodate CNBC or something of that nature. But there also is a First Amendment issue there, and that's been raised for political viewpoints really more than anything else, to say that, well, these guys are only carriers. They are not supposed to be involved with the content in terms of either faction or any political faction. So the issue that I think the FCC will be revisiting again sometime soon is what is the proper way to deal with quote unquote fake news.
Okay, I can tell we're about to get into a heated argument.
Yeah.
My quick note, hold on, Judy, hold on.
Okay.
I'll give you your piece in just a second. And then David, I see that you've got your hand up too. This is part of a discussion also known as an a la carte service offering approach, and whether or not customers can selectively choose which particular channels or groups of channels that they want to service. Okay, Judy, go ahead, fire away.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not suggesting that Fox News be taken off the air. I'm just saying I don't want my money as part of a basic cable package, and that the town has licensed as part of a basic cable package to go towards propagation of false information. So it's not a freedom of issue. It's not a freedom of speech issue. It's a question of forcing me to pay for this through a basic license. Perfectly fine with Comcast that half of this is an a la carte item for people who do wish to watch it. But I'm not saying it should be banned from the air. So it isn't a freedom of speech issue. Secondly, Comcast is not an internet provider. They are a provider of cable services, and they're offering to me licensed through the town. So the town is saying, this is, has signed this agreement. They're saying that, that this is, if I want this service, which has a bunch of other stuff, I'm forced to pay for something that I consider detrimental to my way of life and to my mental health. So again, perfectly happy for Comcast to carry this as an a la carte item that other people can pay for. I'm just suggesting that the town should investigate whether it's appropriate for it to be part of the basic license. So I would suggest your two arguments do not apply to what I'm suggesting.
Thank you, Judy. For the record, I'm going to note that this is a complaint that we will note that we've received about Comcast service when it comes time to do the renewal process. This will be one of several that we're documenting as complaints of our community needs under the assessment process as well. Now, David, you had a quick observation. What was that, please?
I think Judy's gone to the practical path here. It can be an add-on cost and folks can get it. It's important, I think, to address the various questions that get raised here very briefly. It's not clear this is journalism. It's very clearly promotion of what was almost an takeover of the US government by a totalitarian. That's not journalism. And it's certainly not protected as part of a fourth estate On the question of Section 230, that's for folks like platforms, Facebook, so forth, Twitter, etc. Fox isn't a platform, not related, as far as I can see. We can go into some of the other, I guess, the freedom of speech. Tie in with that the net neutrality. Yes, Netflix can't be slowed down, but you have to pay more to get Netflix. I don't think we have any problems on any of those fronts. I think Judy's point's perfectly well taken. And I think if we want to hold our heads up, we're going to face a firestorm in this society. And Concord's one tiny little 17,000 person spot on the map. But that's where we live. And if we want to hold our heads up, we're going to say, this is not okay. We do not want them as part of the basic package. Folks can get them, sure. And I commend this committee to carry this forward, making your voices heard loud and clear to the select board on the matter and carrying forward into the next negotiation. And even now raises question about whether or not it violates the agreement.
Thank you, David. All right, unless there's something else desperately need to be touched on, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. Judy, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you very much for hearing me.
Sure, we'll keep that as part of the process when we go into the franchise renewal. And thanks for letting us document this. Appreciate that much. Okay, let's go back to the agenda item we skipped over, which was the Minutemen Media Network update. And Phil, let's go back to you. Go ahead, Phil, if you can. What's new?
Sure. Thank you again for having me. And yeah, I will just go on some of the things that we've accomplished here and we've been involved in the past month since our last meeting. You know, I'm almost starting to realize I need to, I think, break this down into two areas: services and technical and maybe other. So for example, you know, when I talk about services, you know, one of the things I'm doing is because YouTube gives me a metric, so I'm able to keep an eye on, you know, like how many new subscribers we have, for example, which we have 31 new subscribers in the past month. But it also allows me to keep track in terms of like the number of videos that we have produced, that we have uploaded. And these uploads, most of them are town function, government boards, committees, and that's for Concord and Carlisle, but the lion's share is into Concord. So for example, 39 of those and a total of 56. So the other ones being programs like the League of Women Voters, Concord Days, and a few other projects such. A couple other things to keep in mind too is sports. Again, we've been working with the high school because for the basketball games, we are able to live stream the varsity games. We've been doing that. We've been working with the school. Of course, there's been some quarantine issues. I think it's with the boys team, so we haven't been able to cover all their games, but nonetheless, the girls' games have been going off, and they've been, you know, very appreciative of the work that we've been able to do. Going back to that earlier question about broadcasting from a different location, I know there was somebody had asked about broadcasting elsewhere in the town of other sporting events. I think, for example, swimming being one of them at the Beatty Center. And the Beatty Center, as far as I understand, is not set up currently for, again, a cable jack for us to broadcast. Now, with, again, new technology that is available, that can be done. We do not have it at this moment, though. Some other items with that, and again, that kind of almost blends over into the technical, but I'll jump on that in a few moments. You know, we've also been able to live stream. In fact, the other day, when we had our snow day on Tuesday, the Concord Carlisle School Committee, that was actually live streamed from remote location. So again, this is kind of how we're, you know, looking at what's out there, what we're able to do. But in this case, Mark Pauly, who is our technician, was able to live stream the Concord Carlisle School Committee, not from here in the studio, but from home. Now, he happens to have some of the pieces of equipment that are necessary, his own personal items, but he was willing to give it a try, and it is doable. So, you know, again, the ability to take a project and, you know, again, whether it's live streaming from the actual origin point or from a remote location, so it's kind of switching through the studio, these things are, we're looking into it. We're looking into these alternate ways of distributing our material. On that same line, there was recently have become aware, for example, Fitchburg Public Access actually has an app. I actually literally saw it on a smart TV the other day. And when I was talking with Mark, he's like, oh yeah, that's that is something that is available. Again, something we'd have to look into more for costs and the like, but because everything is so digital now and it's going through computers and the like, it's not a difficult thing for us to, you know, grasp. So again, on the technical side of things, just something that we're aware of, and, you know, besides, say, doing like a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live, and incidentally, Facebook Live in a lot of cases, you know, if people are trying to do something with a Wi-Fi signal, in parts of the town, the Wi-Fi is not very good. So being plugged into a computer jack somewhere is usually very important. So these are a few things that, again, we're looking into on the technical side. Again, back to our services, working with the town's celebrations committee, the national park, and other entities. Patriots Day is going to not take place in the traditional sense, but we are working and seeing what we might be able to do to make another virtual, Patriots Day take place. So that's just, again, a quick sketch of what's happening. I'll take any questions if folks have them.
Okay, any questions for Phil about the station manager stuff? Okay, Vince, go ahead.
Phil, could you circulate some of that YouTube viewership material there?
Sure. What would you be interested in? One of the nice things about YouTube is that, again, on the backside, I can go in and I can look at the analytics, and, you know, it really breaks things down on a lot of levels. So is there something in particular you're looking for, or what would you like?
Well, obviously by program, also any information on who the viewers are, where they come from. I know that actually they produce, you know, a number of statistics about, you know, the age of the viewers. Are they reviewing on mobile platforms? Are they viewing on PCs and Macs and things?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
all of that is actually quite useful.
Sure.
In terms of the way the programs are produced, you know, people are really going to mobile devices, particularly phones and tablets and things of that nature. I think that even impacts the, you know, the way that the camera is used, you know, when you're making videos.
Right. Sure. How far back would you like me to go? Would a year be sufficient, or?
Well, actually, maybe just starting with the current statistics.
Okay. All right. I'll see
know
what
that
I can get.
the viewership has been building up, you know, pretty quickly, and, you know, YouTube hasn't been the major venue in terms of loading up any archive material. I don't know, are you loading up some of the older archive material onto YouTube, or?
Well, that's a really good question. Most of the material dates to about 2017 on YouTube and goes forward from there. Items before that are on what's on our Hypercaster. So if you were to go to minuteman.media, which is the website, and if you need to find something from an earlier time period that was uploaded, that's where that would be available. So yes, we have two different systems going. One of the advantages of YouTube currently, at least, is that we're not having to pay for it. For one, the Hypercaster that we have that has, you know, materials from pre 2017, you know, that's all storage space which we have to pay for. And in fact, one of the technical things is, you know, Mark, you know, has been able to clean up and reorganize that on the back end. So it actually, he's been able to compress some files and get rid of some redundancies and things of that nature. So it's actually freed up some space. But more of the materials that were produced by Concord Carlisle Television, which was certainly was here before, is located at that point. So we have not, and we have discussed that, but that would be a time-consuming process to do that, to start to migrate everything over to YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go with Matt. Matt, you got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, so first I wanted to commend Phil and the team for tracking down a couple of archive videos that could help the planning board as they assess some things that were decided several years ago at town meeting and in a town public hearing. But actually, back to that archive, I mean, it'd be nice to kind of have it more clear about how someone could access this. I'm not suggesting uploading all the archive videos to YouTube, but just as an example, now that I understand that I could search, based upon just the Minuteman website, I did go in and just try to put in like planning board public hearing, and I got one hit that was from 2018. I didn't get the file that actually you guys found for us. So I don't know whether it's a problem with the indexing of the search or maybe just, I don't know, something. But if that archive is available, that's wonderful. But also and make it both visible and searchable would be key.
Absolutely.
And I realize it's a very occasional use, but it's also potentially vitally important in some cases, because we do have a lot of our government decision making that's captured there in greater detail than minutes would have ever shown.
Right. When you said you went in, you went into the Minuteman Media Archive and you?
Yeah, I went to minuteman.media.
Okay.
Then on the left, I saw this option for video archives.
Right.
Then I went to the video archives page, and in the search box, I typed planning board public hearing, and one hit came up, which was 2018.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of that, as you mentioned, is like how things are phrased or worded, keywords being a factor. I think that's where YouTube, I think, starts to shine a little bit more. You can, in fact, that's the point we do when we're uploading things. We do try to add some keywords that will hopefully, again, make a search a little bit easier. But you're right, it becomes unwieldy after a point.
Yeah,
in your case, I think you knew exactly what you were looking for, and you still couldn't find it.
Yeah. I mean, Google, of course, is the world's best search, so it's hard to compete with.
Thanks, Matt. Ruth, did you have a question or observation? You were holding your hand up. Or
I wanted to comment that our town saves things. And we've recently added the position of archivist. And I think if through some process over time, we could capture this information that Phil is describing and Court has a long history in, it could be to our benefit. I mean, I know that we have tapes, old word, and CDs about town meeting, but local government is so much more than town meeting. If we had the hearings that could be archived in a central location. I mean, this is such a town, you could tell probably if Henry David Thoreau had a dog and what his dog license number was, because we have the material for it. But can we capture these decisions that don't grow old? You could say, well, that was a half dozen years ago. But what we do today is based on what happened so much earlier. And I'm not suggesting that Phil and his team, ta-da! Yes, good, Matt. That's Sarah Chapin, right? Yep, I think it is.
It's fantastic. All I can say.
I think it's
Okay.
150-year period, it's fantastic.
Matt, for those people who just didn't see the visual right now, you're holding up a book based on what Ruth said. It's called Entering Concord by whom?
Sarah Chapin.
Sarah
Sarah
Chapin.
History of
Okay,
Public
and
Affairs.
it's
Okay, all right,
not-
fine.
It tells you everything for about from 1850 to 2000, everything that happened in Concord government. I
Okay,
mean, every hire by name, it's amazing.
You're right, we
Police
do have a-
department has a huge chapter. Fire department has a big chapter.
okay. Thank you very much. All right, folks, we're about to go into the liaison section of this particular comment, of this particular approach. David, I saw you raised your hand, but let's talk about that during the public comment. All right, liaisons. Matt, you're going to be first, and then Carol, if you have a Council on Aging update you can give us, I'd appreciate that. And then we'll take it from there. Matt, go ahead.
Wow, sorry, I'm kind of, I'm not aware of what I should be putting in.
Okay.
I mean, we're looking at all kinds of things, the middle school, but it related to this committee. All I can say is that maybe the most relevant thing is that the town manager recently provided us with visibility to the initial draft budget, which will be discussed with the Finance Committee. So, that the fiscal environment is clearly very tight this year. So those are just the things to keep in mind. And I think that may provide a little bit of background on why maybe there was more reticence on hiring just under the current economic circumstances.
Got it. Thank you. Carol, how about a Council on Aging report? And you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Da-da-da.
Unmute. Okay.
There you go.
Good. Hey, Carol, would you give your name and your address, please? And what you're
Carol
representing?
Fishing, 83 Anson Road,
And you're here because you're Council on Aging, right?
liaison, right?
Yes,
Right.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, last time we were here, Phil had mentioned something about the Massachusetts Council on Aging putting out some cooking shows. And actually, the council already knew about that, and Tina Close was working with it. And it came out in our bulletin for the month of February that it's going to be produced on the public television network at Channel 8. So the thing is, of course, the only way people really know about these things is reading the bulletin that the council puts out. Or if they're tech savvy, they can go onto the Minuteman site and look at the programs that are being produced each day. And they can't get that by looking at their TV and seeing the guide like every other station has the programming there. So I don't know how widespread the watching of the shows are from people from, the over 65 in Concord. So it's too bad, because I think if you could scroll through and see what's on Channel 8 while you're out watching TV at this time, that would be great, or Channel 9 or Channel 99. But other than that, there's nothing else that's happened. They did have a COVID drive-through on the 10th. And don't know how that went, though. Only 100 people were able to get their shots that day.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Carol. Okay, Court, I don't know if you had any additional comments you want to make on behalf of the school committee, but you're the school representative, so fire away, Court. Go ahead.
So I think we've covered all of it, but as a private citizen, 144 Wright Road, not speaking for the school committee, I hope with all of the hearings coming up that Phil, your team could get those dates to the Concord Journal. So we've got that other journalism source in synergy with us.
And
I'm not sure. What do you mean, us getting the dates?
You're going to be covering a lot of pre-town meeting hearings.
Yeah.
And attendance is not always as robust as we'd like. And so if we could get those dates to you, you could confirm what you're going to cover, whether it's going out live or post meeting. I'd like to get that to the Journal, save what's left of their waning readership.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, having a schedule as to what's when, sure.
Because people don't always get to your website to look at that schedule
Right,
without some coaxing.
right.
Thank you.
But I
Okay.
think that we ourselves have an obligation to make sure Phil is informed of when the various hearings occur so that he can slip that into his planning.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
make it easy. I'll send, Phil, I'm going to send you the town committee's list of the public hearings for leading up to town meetings, so you have that. It's on their webpage, but I'll send you an email about that, okay? All right, let's open up. It's 10:51. Let's open up to public comment. Any other comments? David, did you want to go first? Go ahead, David.
Thanks. If I could check on archives, Phil, could we dive down just a taste? What's the technology that you use for the archives? Is it servers on site? Is it otherwise? And if I could follow on from there.
Well, again, we have a small server room. We have so many, gigs worth of storage. But again, are you talking about for like something that you can call up from the internet, or?
So Matt had described his own experience going to the archives section. And I just wanted to tease out a little bit some of the underlying technical facts. When Matt goes there, he's going to your server, your little server setup. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
Okay. So I wanted to know, and you'll know this without my saying it, but for us broadly, services like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and their competitors, Microsoft, Google, and so forth, but certainly AWS, they're far and away the leaders. If our archives were up there, we'd have no problem maintaining servers and space and so forth. It's essentially infinite as far as we're concerned. There's some cost to it, yes. I think the larger cost is getting it up there. The personnel cost you would incur, Phil, to do something like that. But I think Ruth has made a really fundamental point here. I know I myself, I'm looking back to town meetings certain years, certainly over a decade ago. I want to be able to click and just go, and there is the recording. Adding to the personnel cost you'd suffer, as we've pointed out, some of this is not currently digitized. It's on disk, or heaven forbid, even tape. Yes, that would require some consideration and a real budget, careful look, but until we have got that sort of archive, and I think quite clearly it needs to be in the cloud. I don't think there's any real question about that. And you then wouldn't have the burden of keeping up a server and the technical work involved with that. Until we've gotten there, well, let's say we've got ourselves, in my view, a very clear objective.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to say, Frank, you've got a comment. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, well, when the Comcast representative said that we were going to be limited to 1.2 terabytes of data, that concerned me because I was always over that. And but then I called to go for supposedly for $30 more, you could get unlimited. So I called and they said that I guess they've put that back now to July. So I think you're good. You get unlimited, free unlimited data until July, and then there might be some other decision at that point. So that was, I don't know if that concerns anyone else here.
So somebody got to them. Thanks for the word, Frank. Gracious.
I didn't get
got to them.
Well, I mean, I have 3 users in the family that are always watching videos. So
We had
Thank you.
1.9 terabytes, and we had 10 people. But
Okay, maybe we should have a contest that we could videotape. Who can use the most internet? And I will beat you all because I'll have my son come here and his girlfriend and everyone will pile on. Anyway, okay, that's been really good. It's 10:55. I'm about ready to look for a motion to adjourn because we've run through the entire agenda unless there's some other thing that we need to deal with. Going once, going twice.
So move.
May I have a second? Come on, guys. This is
Second.
where you do the second part. All right, we got a second from Vince. We'll do a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Carlin Reed says aye. Ruth Lauer,
Aye.
Vince Carlson,
All right.
and Court Booth.
All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you, folks. Next meeting is March 11. We'll see you then. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you much.
Bye.